Namaskar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Rahul Koul, Chief Editor, BioVoice News, and host for today. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the e-conference on digital laboratories, the emerging era of high-tech R&D, organized by BioVoice News, India's leading digital news media platform for providing news and insights on the life sciences industry. Founded in 2016, BioVoice News reports on the latest news, views, trends, and business, R&D, academia, and startups, as well as policy and human resources within biotechnology, healthcare, and agriculture. Well appreciated by the life sciences ecosystem in India, this particular platform has been highly interactive. And we are in our 6th year, we are celebrating our 6th anniversary. And it is fast emerging as a reflective point for all the stakeholders. And ladies and gentlemen, the idea behind this event is to understand how digital technologies are transforming, and accelerating the delivery of breakthrough solutions in the rapidly evolving R&D setups. So as technologies improve, the biotechnology and pharmaceutical companies are upgrading their laboratories with latest digital technologies to streamline existing processes or pursue innovations. So ongoing research suggests that using data and artificial intelligence could be a game-changing strategy for finding new drugs and increasing their chances of regulatory success and accelerated time to market. So there's a growing interest in using intelligent analytical tools to help make sense of the massive quantities of data collected in biotech and similar fields. So by switching to a digital lab, organizations can take a big step towards being more productive. Automation will make it easier for lab managers to focus on more specialized tasks and responsibilities as well. It doesn't just eliminate human error, but also helps scientists spend their valuable time and energy in the right direction and be more productive as well. And today's discussion certainly is going to focus on certain important points related to this topic. And these include digitally powered smart labs, understanding the concept and scope, lessons from COVID-19 and how it helped in accelerating digital interventions in R&D, implementation of digital initiatives, unique experiences at the organizational and industry level, connected labs and advanced automation for better outcomes, digital labs as a catalyst for Make in India, imagining the futuristic smart labs and the impact it will have on the R&D. So I once again, a warm welcome to our panelists and delegates who are joining us from various parts of India as well as the world. So ladies and gentlemen, we have a distinguished panel lineup for this session. And we hope that you thoroughly enjoy this fruitful discussion. And now, on this very high note, let me introduce my esteemed panelist for today. And, first of all, I would like to extend my warm welcome to Dr. Anil Koul, Vice President, Global Public Health Discovery, Johnson & Johnson. With over 2 decades of extensive experience in drug discovery and translational research, Dr. Koul spearheads many key R&D projects at Johnson & Johnson. A scientist par excellence, Dr. Koul was honored with prestigious Heroes of Chemistry Award by the American Chemical Society for the discovery of tuberculosis drug Bedaquiline. Dr. Koul has also served as the director of the Institute of Microbial Technology, also popularly known as CSIR IMTech. He is currently also a member of Apex Scientific Advisory Board of CSIR. Next, I would like to welcome Dr. Anu Singh. She's the Chief Scientific Officer at Dabur Research Foundation. And Dr. Singh, with more than 30 years of expertise in cancer drugs, heads the R&D team at Dabur Research Foundation. She has contributed to the successful development and global commercialization of many key drugs, including a nanoparticle-based drug for breast and ovarian cancers, and a peptide-based anti-cancer drug that was out-licensed to a European pharma major. Welcome, Dr. Singh. And now I would like to extend my warm welcome to Dr. Prabhuda Kundu, Managing Director, Premas Biotech, with his deep biopharma R&D experience that extends beyond 2 decades. Dr. Prabhuda Kundu has more than 22 publications and 10 patents to his credit. Dr. Kundu began his career at Biorad, and before moving to Ranbaxy, and then finally co-founded Premas Biotech in 2006. He's an active member of Confederation of Indian Industries in the biotech space, and various institutions and self-help groups on education, healthcare, and innovations. Welcome, Dr. Kundu. And now I would like to welcome Dr. Taslimarif Sayied. Dr. Taslim has been instrumental behind many key initiatives in India, particularly in the academic sector. And Dr. Taslim is the CEO and director of C-Camp Bangalore, and he is a well-known face, popular face in the academic circles. He wears many hats, from heading the Discovery to Innovation Accelerator program at C-Camp. He's also an adjunct faculty at Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, and Amrita Institute School of Biotechnology. Welcome, Dr. Taslim again. And then we have with us Mr. Nicholas Tan, who's the head of Southeast Asian region, Illumina, and he's currently leading the Southeast Asia and India commercial team at Illumina, which is well known as a leader in sequencing and array-based solutions for genetic analysis. Mr. Tan is very passionate about technology, and he shares his company's mission to impact human lives by unlocking the power of genome. With over 18 years of rich experience, Mr. Tan has been associated with Illumina in various capacities for last 6.5 years. I once again extend my greetings to all the panelists and look forward to their insights. So before we begin this discussion, my humble request to the delegates is that they should share their queries only in the Q&A window, and if time permits, our esteemed panelists shall try and reply to all the queries by the end of the session. So without much ado, now I'd like to begin the first round with 3 minutes of time for each speaker. So for the first round, let me put my first question to Dr. Anil Koul, Vice President, Johnson & Johnson. Sir, what is your understanding of the digitally powered smart labs, the concept and scope? Over to you, Dr. Koul.
Thanks, Rahulji. I think once again, thank you, BioVoice, for building this program. And for also the invitations to all the key leaders in the biopharmaceuticals, as well as in the pharmaceutical, as well as in technology industry, and bringing them all to this particular forum. So I think it's a very nice topic in terms of what does digital labs mean? The digital labs can have different annotations. If we look at biological lab space, or digitalization of the labs has been happening our last 2 to 3 years, much more intensely. But in the last 1 decade, we have seen immense digitalization. So digitalization in the primary thing for me is looking at data management from a discovery setup. So data management is a very important focus for digitalization, and digitalization means that we have to be smart, we have to be efficient, and we have to be creating a safe environment in the lab. And at the same time, it means proper resource management. So I think there are several aspects to it. I can't go in all the details, but I can tell you the key for digitalization in Indian context or in Asian context is how do we automate documentation, what we call paperless data. So in that regard, we have seen a lot of technologies which have come forward, what we call electronic lab notebooks. So I think we when I was in India, we still do a lot of data and data archiving as well as data analysis through our regular lab notebooks. I think how the world is moving ahead is through these electronic lab notebooks, which give you access to the data online, which give you access data anywhere, which help you build data sets and analyze data sets even during the conferences anywhere in the world, and which help you archive the data, which is the most critical. You can visit any data file anytime using these electronic lab notebooks. So I think that's the primary aspect of the digital lab in future, particularly in Indian context, is to build that framework of data documentation and data analysis. So another aspect of course, if we go in the digital space for future labs, is the technology platforms. The technology platform, this can involve any technology. This can involve IoT in terms of screening of the compounds. Like you have pipettes, which will be content or dispensers, liquid dispensers or pipettes, which can be connected to the internet, and they automatically dispense certain volumes. They measure all the parameters, they measure the temperature of the solutions, they measure, and several different things can be automated in terms of liquid dispensation. So we do it regularly right now in our screening assays, because we have these automatic robots which do dispense and do pipetting for us. So in overall, I think when you go and beyond the discovery space, and when you go into preclinical space, the automation and data management in terms of generating those compliance reports. So that's something which where digital labs have the future, because this will be, as I once again stress, it has to be all paperless. So there are different elements, technological elements, data management elements, as well as compliance elements, which come in a future digital lab space.
Thank you, Dr. Koul. Quite insightful. The questions remain same for next panelist, and that is Dr. Anu Singh. Ma'am, please provide us a perspective on these smart labs, the concept and understanding from your perspective. What is your idea about these labs?
Thanks, Rahul. Am I audible? No problem.
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah. So, I want to say that this is not, Dr. Koul really explained this very nicely. I think we have to think of this, creating the smart labs and moving towards digitalization of labs, no longer as something that it's nice to do. I think it's a necessity for us, all of us, who are actually spending a lifetime, our scientists, ourselves, we spend a lifetime of generating data. So I think the first goal, the most important thing is that we should not lose the research and the data that we do. Now, this is something that we see very often in laboratory practices on the ground, that data in projects is generated over years sometimes, and it's precious. And the versions that we change, the improvements that we do in our search for new molecules, the processes that we follow, they evolve over a period of time. Very often, my learning has been that work gets lost, because for a simple fact that it's stretched over a period of time. So it is more like a necessity that we need to use this electronic laboratory notebook system that Dr. Koul spoke about, or any other mechanisms. But data has to be digitalized, It has to stop being dependent upon a person who was working on the project and is no longer available today or leaves the organization. The data comes first and people have to come after that. So for me, keeping the data integrity is the first goal of creating a smart lab, and it's a necessity. The other thing which I feel is from a discovery perspective, because where we are using technology and digital technology is what we are speaking about here for accelerating discovery. Now, that is something that is absolutely, I think a lot of us are using it, and we have to use it to enhance productivity. For example, currently we are using combinations of AI and machine learning for our drug discovery programs. Because of course it needs a lot of validation, because when we are doing computational designing, it needs to be validated in the lab. But we've begun, because that is perhaps the best way to accelerate the drug discovery processes. And that's why the digital technologies come in a very big way. Rahul, also to add to that, when we need to evaluate large number of compounds, why large number? Even if I wanted to evaluate 10 compounds that came out of a synthetic laboratory, I need to have technologies because time is of essence. So we are using a lot of digital approaches there as well. So to me, a smart lab means something which is digitalized to the extent that the integrity of the data and the speed of doing things is the top priority. That's the first goal. There are many more. There are many more, and we'll talk about it maybe in the next set of questions that you bring. But this is the one that comes top to my mind. And I think even if we haven't begun it, it's time to begin. And we have to give ourselves a reasonable time frame that I'm going to take this much time in my setup or in my laboratory to achieve the digitalization by an X month, or 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line. I found a lot of resistance from some of our scientists, and I explained to them that we are setting a timeline to it. We will go paperless, not today. We'll probably go paperless 6 months later. And I think that's how the resistance and the barriers came down, and people are now working slowly over a period of time.
So any particular reasons why are these inhibitions there? Why are people reluctant to adopt digital means?
Now, people, scientists in general, as you know, are very comfortable with their notebooks, the hard notebooks, the paper notebooks. They like to write in their notebooks. It allows them the flexibility to write someday and not write another. But the moment you digitalize a process, there's an entry date. There is a video recording that so-and-so person came and did that experiment. And it shows up immediately when the records are not there. So there is a compliance issue. It's a discipline. It's actually a discipline that one has to inculcate. And I think the resistance comes from there. And my way of approaching it is that any change that we build in a system, however much you convince people that it's good for you, people have to be given time, and their efforts have to be appreciated, that we move one step closer to digitization. But my reasons are that it requires compliance and discipline to shift from writing on my notebook versus actually doing it in a manner which is measurable and it can be actually seen by the rest of the team. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for sharing such insights. And now my next question is to Dr. Prabhuda Kundu. And the question almost means same. What is your understanding of smart labs and at the both industry level as well as at your company?
No, thank you so much for this opportunity, and may I also give what an honor it is for me to share the same platform with such illustrious speakers. So thank you. Both Dr. Koul and Anu have touched on certain things which I'm very passionate about. And one of them has been, many of you may not know, and I'll come to that, that we introduced lean, or I played with lean in R&D, or what the Toyota system, as early as 2007. We were called absolutely, many various names, and there was a lot of resistance because lean happens when something is already structured and all. So I'll just roll back to this two learnings, because what Anu felt as the resistance, and I'll recount. See, as scientists, we are both generators and consumers of data. It is when data becomes information that it becomes useful. And this is what I have truly believed, that, and this is where smart labs is going to make a difference. Because when our data is stuck as information in a LNB, it's not accessible, it's not democratic. The minute you digitize it, you're democratizing data, which means it's now accessible across the organization, across geographies at any time. I may want it at 9 o'clock, I may want it at 6 a.m. It's available to me. Then I'm not dependent on anybody at any point of time to get access of that data. Second, it reduces lag. Because if I can do it at the time I want, at the way I want, it allows that freedom. But however, there is a backlash to it, which I've realized, because we introduced e-labs as early as 2003 in Ranbaxy. Large organization, large issues, but it was developed mostly for chemistry, and it used to be called New Genesis. And we were a biotech group in a very large company. So there was nothing for biology. We realized it. I mean, then working with New Genesis, we developed the e-lab, what was the first e-lab for biology at Premas. We actually wrote some of that code, and that's where the resistance came. The biggest resistance came was, I have to do everything in a very timely, auditable, 21 CFR compliant manner, which means I can't, if I make a mistake, it's recorded. LNB is the distillation of the entire experiment. It does not perhaps record what went wrong and what was not to be written, because we don't like rewriting and cutting in our LNBs. The opposite of that was, we were so far out into the future in 2005 when we implemented it, whether it was regulatory or whether it was our clients or partners, everybody wanted an LNB. So here we were saddled with an electronic lab notebook and having to do everything now on a, what you call a LNB format. So in between, we actually lost the ELN because everybody shifted to the LNB format. And now we are trying to bring it back. The learnings I've had is, we are all trying to reduce silos and take away, resistance to change. However, it's extremely difficult. Perhaps the next generation of scientists who perhaps we may have to start with electronic labs at schools.
Yes.
So that they get inculcated and the resistance doesn't build up, because we are building habit. So if you want to really make change, maybe we should start, as Sports Authority of India says, start young, catch them young. Maybe you have to catch them really young. We just don't know how young, but young. And who are the first adapters? They will always, I have read somewhere, there's a curve of innovation. Early adapters, primary movers, and then laggards, and etc., etc. We have to really identify who will be those early adapters of these technologies. So just to come to sort of summary of my points is, we all want to innovate and innovate rapidly. And both small companies and large companies, I've realized, have organizational learning issues, which means if somebody does a great protein purification, which is what we do, then he goes away, he takes along that organization learning with him or her.
Yeah.
One of the ways we thought institutionalizing would be putting it in the ELN. But what we have also realized, that sometimes we cannot digitize everything. There are certain peripheral learnings which we have not been able to, especially for a difficult process. So that has been one of our things. So we are now trying to build in what's called a digital competency map. It's a very early stage we are trying to do, is marry a person's ability to think, write, draft, and build in an HR concept. But again, who knows where we will go. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Kundu, for sharing such nice anecdotes and such a insightful view. And now I'd like to ask the same question to Dr. Taslimarif Sayied, and that would be from academic perspective, how he looks at this concept from academic perspective, and how it has been implemented in universities and research institutes.
Thank you, Mr. Rahul, and also thank you, BioVoice, for doing this very exciting session with absolute experts. I'll try to give my couple of cents worth inputs. But to begin with, I would add to already points made very strongly by all my friends, Dr. Anil, Dr. Anu, and Dr. Prabhuda here. I think it goes without saying that I think digitization, if you were to say that, one part of the smart lab ensures many the weaknesses that most of us have in terms of meticulousness and the documentation. That would be one taken care of, because we all have those weaknesses, and that could be taken care, and that could be in a process-driven approach. So that is there, and it has been said elaborately, and many other components in terms of compliance and so on. But if I may just add to another layer of dialogue, just for the fun of it, if I may say, when we say smart labs, if I may just use the analogy here, is that if you want to say smart watch, in that spirit, if I may take the level of that connotation and say, what can you done in a smart lab? So I'll give you an example, what can be done and what is being done in a smart lab. We all, and I, and as and when I learned my mammalian cell culture, we used to be in that closed chamber for hours to, carry out primary cultures and mammalian cell cultures, and then put them on a CO2 incubator and then watch them over. Let's see whether the confluence is there or not, change the media, do this, do that. Now, this is in many places, at least in a few places, is not done by humans. It's completely done by smart machines, which have taken over, which look at the health of the cells inside, which look at whether the media needs to be changed, whether you need to have imaging and all that. That's actually building in capability of, as one uses the word smart, and then, give it where we, some of the work that we have understood and we know that the cruciality of it, we delegate that work, in a way, and ensure that that gets delivered, and we move on to use our time to the newer heights in a way. Similarly, I think the smart component could be utilized in not only this, but this was just an example, in many other components, and I don't see them holding back only on that. Many other components will come in, where running a simple molecular biology effort would actually be converted into a completely smart, where it will be done automatically, image will be taken automatically, and even the first level of analytics would be done automatically. We will not need a ladder to look at the protein or an agar gel and many other components as we speak, So those many components will come in. The third thing is that something that Illumina is very, good at. Many components in terms of next level of high throughput screening, high content screening, genomics, and many other way, where the assessment from the chemistry perspective, from the sample preparation perspective, from the runs perspective, from the outcome perspective, could be all handled at assessment, and everything could be handled by machines themselves. And many things could be done. If you were to say that even at the earliest, very small scale lab perspective, you could actually have machines to ensure that the integration of different work that is happening from one data that has happened here for the same. If you say the same ID is being done somewhere else, how do you combine and say that, hey, something exciting is coming up? It may not require a curious observation of sorts. So there are, some crazy thoughts you could build in and be ambitious about what you can actually go in smart labs and build on that. But I'll stop here, but just wanted to kind of, add to and spice up a little bit in terms of what you could do with smart labs and go by that. Thank you.
So next, thank you, Dr. Taslim. Now I'd like to next invite Mr. Nicholas Tan to share his thoughts on his understanding of the digitally powered smart labs, the concept and scope.
Thanks, Rahul, and pleasure to be here, and also I'm really honored to be among the esteemed guests that you've invited here today for the panel. For us, I personally think that as we see technology develop, the amount of information that has to be managed has just increased exponentially, right? From example, from Illumina's perspective, we've seen acceleration of genomics in healthcare driving a lot of demand for sequencing in oncology, for example, reproductive health, and that has actually led to a lot of data being generated, right? But the issue now with data is the data is as good as what it's used for, right? For example, how do we get the data out there and really make it useful? And simple thing is that the data needs to be findable, it needs to be accessible, It needs to be interoperable, meaning that it needs to be able to access from different computer systems and everything, and reusable, right? Having data just being kept in individual silos alone is no longer sufficient. And that's what I guess the labs in the past were about, right? It was about generating a lot of data, but then the data was literally kept in literal silos because of the requirements and the limitations of the past. So I do see this move being one that's driven of sort of like a need to evolve together with the amount of data that is currently being generated, right? And really, you not only is now maintaining an older data set in a silo going to cost you more, right? You also see that because the utility of data drops and the ability to integrate data actually drops, the actual use of the data also diminishes. So, besides all the points that's mentioned, I really think it's a lot about how do we make the data and consume the data the best way we can. And one of that methods is to have the lab go into the digital or the smart space. And we've seen that evolve in many shapes and sizes, depending on the laboratory itself, what they are doing and their focus work, right? So that's something that I think that we're definitely seeing. For example, something like a LIMS system here in Illumina, the Clarity LIMS system, the Laboratory Information Management System, right? It helps you keep track of sample information, workflow analysis, and some of it may actually be important in different flows. For example, in a clinical setting, these things will have to be tracked. There is a very little room for human error. You really want to minimize any touch points that's out of the approved process. So that's really, really important. But however, in a research setting, then we see a different, different levels of importance based on different aspects of it as well. So definitely, I think the digital labs of the future, the great part about it is that it gets to be tailor-made towards its utility, and at the same time, be able to maximize all the outputs that come from the lab. So that's what we currently see here in Illumina.
Thank you, Mr. Tan. Now we come to the second round of the discussion, and I'll begin my question, and that is, what lessons we have learned from COVID-19 and how it has helped in accelerating digital interventions in R&D. And this question is first to Dr. Anil Koul. Over to you, Dr. Koul.
Yeah, Rahul, thank you. I think this is a fantastic question. I think there are so many lessons from COVID-19. I think each one of us has his own story in terms of the lessons learned. So I think I won't go into the science in detail around the lessons learned and what we have done good and what we have not done good. But I think what everybody else will appreciate that there are 6 C's, what I call, which we have learned, and the learnings are that what we have been able to define was a common cause across the world, across these 7 billion people on this planet. We did identify SARS-CoV-2 as a common cause. That's the first C. The second C is that we identify scientists, policymakers, medical workers as champions. We brought them to the forefront in terms of taking care of this disease. So different elements of social as well as scientific community came together in order to fight the world. I think what it also demonstrated the commitment in terms of the leadership, that the leadership was committed to develop a vaccine. The leadership was committed to tackle the pandemic. The leadership was committed in terms of developing new drugs, diagnostics, so many different elements in terms of the learnings. And in my personal history of drug discovery and development for the last 20 years, I have never seen programs being so accelerated in terms of the development path. So we have been able to generate vaccines in the shortest period of time. We have been able to develop diagnostics in a shortest period of time. We have 1.5 year, we have a vaccine platforms across the world, we did all the clinical studies, we did all the discovery research, we did all the preclinical, and we got it into the societies and the communities, and people got vaccinated. India is a classic example. I think in India, we had 1.8 billion vaccine doses. So that's a huge accomplishment in terms of not only manufacturing, not only the supply chain, not only discovering those vaccines, but also the logistics of vaccinating the populations in such a massive scale. So that's the commitment, and then there is a clarity. So the clarity of purpose was the fourth C. So the clarity in terms of seeing a common aim and ambition, that okay, this is that we want to develop it. Even within the small teams, the vaccine team said that okay, we want to develop a next COVID vaccine in 1 year, which was never thought about. It takes 10 to 11 to 12 years to develop any new drug, but within 1 year, we have been as a scientific community, as people believing in science and technology, we have been able to do that. I think the communication, there have been miscommunications, but overall, in terms of learnings, and the communication at all levels within the teams, that we have been able to communicate very effectively, very efficiently, in terms of what the desired outcomes should be, what the process should look like, what we call target product profiles should look like, and things like that. So the communications has been key. And I can tell you, within the teams, because it's discovery and development is multifactorial. It's not one single person who does it, it's teams. I think that camaraderie within the groups have been really amazing. So just in terms of the impact of COVID has been in terms of how fast we can come together and solve a problem. I think this is the biggest learning. I personally feel that what we have as a human race, that there are several challenges what we have, or what the world faces right now. But I can tell you what COVID has taught me personally is that every problem what the human kind faces, we at the same time have people, we have technologies, we have platforms where we can find a solution to that problem, if and only we adhere to these 6 C's.
Thank you, Dr. Koul. If I sum it up, I can sum it up in 2 words: COVID equal to collaboration. So thank you for such an insightful view. And now question remains same for Dr. Anu Singh also. That is, what lessons have we learned from COVID-19 and how it helped in accelerating digital interventions in R&D? Over to you, Dr. Singh.
Thanks, Rahul. I think my thoughts are going to somewhat echo what Dr. Koul said here. But what I want to say at the outset is that COVID taught us the kind of lessons to scientists, positive lessons, which I never thought I'd learn in my lifetime. So I just want to put this on record. We were not doing, at my organization, we were not work in virus research till COVID came into our lives in this world. But when the first lockdown occurred, and I clearly remember all of us sitting in the lab and thinking that this is going to impact a lot of different things, lives, health, business, everything. What can we do? And we decided that why don't we use this opportunity and time to start working on COVID? In whatever way we can, let's start. And I think when I say whatever way we can, it was because of the nature of the lockdown when we started. People were not meeting enough. We were not able to meet. Laboratory work was disrupted. So I think that is why I say I learned the maximum in the last 2.5 years about how to do drug development through collaborations when less people are able to meet, when laboratories are disrupted. How do you collaborate with people over ideas and experiments very quickly and get to results? I'm very happy to share this with you. I truly think that that must be the finest thing that we did in recent years at Dabur Research Foundation. We set up collaborations with people across the world who would contribute to the COVID research and repurposing of compounds for COVID, and kept up nasal sprays for COVID during that time. And it was time zero for us. We actually just found the right people all over the world who could do different things. We realized what is the component that we can do well. So there were online collaborations. There were experiments that were happening in parallel across the world. Seminars, confidentiality of data was maintained. We were able to check a whole lot of compounds for the antiviral activities. We were able to do full projects on COVID and bring it to its logical completion by finding molecules that could be repurposed. We also developed a nasal spray for COVID all through those 2.5 years of COVID. But what it taught us was mind-boggling. In my previous experience, and I am sure a lot of scientists here can relate to it, if you start a new project in drug development, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years is very, very normal time frame for us to actually come to the regulatory compliances and commercialization. In COVID, we could do it in 2 years. And I really think it is this approach, the collaborative approach, using digital technologies and maintaining confidentiality in the collaborative mode without people meeting each other in any significant manner or being at any one place. So I think it is the digital world that brought about this, and it was the need of the moment. We were compelled to think differently in the drug development path, and I'm glad we did that. So we've always followed somewhat of a linear path in drug development approaches, but COVID taught us that there are better ways to do drug development.
Indeed, Dr. Singh, thank you. And my next question is to Dr. Prabhuda Kundu. And the question is, when will the life sciences companies make the turn to embrace digitalization as a fundamental driver of innovation and business growth in our new world?
Thank you, Rahul. And if I may go back to and spend a minute on our previous discussion, because Taslim raised a very interesting thing. As an example, I always try to scare some of the people here. I said, when the whole human genome was first sequenced, I am told it took about 10 years, $2 billion, and about 150,000 square feet, and maybe 2,000 people, 3,000, or more than thousands of people. Today, we are partners, my fellow sister companies, partners of Illumina, Premas Life Sciences. And I think the whole thing can be done in maybe an hour, a couple of days, one person doing it in a 2 square feet area at less than $1,000. It has taken about 30 years to do that. I fear the day where, I don't fear actually, I think there will be a day where you will be able to sit in front of an iPad, enter an accession number, and somewhere a protein will come out from one. I'm sure. If people have already, I've seen videos on YouTube where people have tried to integrate expression purification into it, but I'm sure days are not far where this will happen. What all this is sort of telling us as an indication is, if we do not innovate and move to an area of discomfort, we are going, either we will be shut down or we will lose the race. So innovation is the key, change is the key. I mean, everyone has read, and there are hundreds of books nowadays on managing change and innovation. So if at all there is a lesson to be learned, that for change to really occur, you need a driver. COVID was a fantastic, I mean, in a very wrong way, it has been a driver. It's really shaken us up, shaken us at the roots, and therefore, once the human race got shaken up, it reacted and sort of went forward. And that's what we are seeing is the tail effect. But as they say, memory is short. I just hope that the lessons learned are not, eradicated soon with the euphoria that it has gone. But I mean, today it's very interesting that even if you ask a common man about a vaccine, he talks about neutralizing antibodies. Think about it. 2 years ago, at the most, even a non-virologist would not talk of neutralizing antibodies. Today, we are talking of real-time PCR tests as if it is common language. Means that the common man understands what we mean by it. So there has been a dramatic shift. Biology has, unfortunately, as Dr. Koul said, or drug discovery has got its limelight now. We need to take those changes. We need to make those decisions to change, and life science companies, irrespective of geography, irrespective of where it is, has realized that you're not an island anymore. You are in a connected world, and your data tomorrow will be examined, scrutinized by various agencies. So there is a certain lateral movement of data that will happen, whichever part of drug discovery you are in. So if I were to sort of put into bullet points, you must have a policy or a process where you are transforming your company into a digital world. It has to have. If you don't have, you should start. If you have, you should pause and think whether the strategy you have will suit a pandemic, post-pandemic world. And if the first two are right, then I guess you are well ahead of the curve. So you don't need any more advice from me. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Kundu. Now my next question is to Dr. Taslimarif Sayied. And the question almost remains same. He particularly talked about a few things which were quite interesting in his previous speech, and it was about smart watch versus smart lab, and he gave that anecdote of smart watch. Now my question is that whether in academia, particularly the universities and research institutes, how reluctant or how adaptive are they to digitalization? Have they really, initiated, or they have certain challenges which they need to overcome to in terms of policy, in terms of funds, funding allocation. So what are these bottlenecks that stand before the digitalization, particularly in academics? Over to you, Dr. Taslim.
Yeah, no, thank you again. I would say from labs perspective, in academic labs, and from whatever little knowledge I have, I think it is a process to move towards a new system. To be honest, there have been conventional ways of doing things, and anything new takes time, and it takes time more so where the structures are a bit more stronger to support the mistakes, right? And the smaller organizations, smaller teams, very small teams are much more nimble. But when you have larger organizations where you have structures to support any errors and build safety nets, I think that's where the processes take longer time to change. And I would say that one way to look at it from a perspective is that anything that enables us more, it will be accepted at the end of the day. As simple as that. I think we have to, we all are here to ensure that something that adds to our efficiency, adds to our productivity, adds to our outcomes, I'm sure we will accept it. And it is a process by which it would happen. If we take the process of, if I one say that lab versus non-lab presence, I think slowly and steadily through the new instrumentation, new capabilities, the log books, the digitization, the use of the equipment, I think the use of these are coming through. I already know that there are many instruments which are available in India where you can actually see them on their app. Just like we have apps, we can see there on their app that how far the machine has run. So on Saturday, I don't have to take a picture of a machine which has gone off and send the picture to somebody saying that, hey, by the way, you're running a sample, your machine is off. They should be able to see it from wherever they are, and have an error saying that this machine has gone off, and that is being used. However, the only thing I would say is that it is not being driven as a mandate, and which is perfectly good, because I think you should do it. But whatever is required is being done at a small lab level, or the organizational level. But individually, I feel that there is a humongous strength in utilizing such technology and enabling us to do more. And I think we should accept it till the level that it still allows us some level of what you would say support level, and doesn't really become a little bit of chaotic, which can happen when you overuse technology per se. So I think a balance between the two would be a good way to look at it. And I think it's a process, it's in the process, work in progress, if I would say, and pause here for now.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Taslim. My next question for Mr. Nicholas Tan, and that is, how is your organization democratizing the genomics through advancements in the technology? And supplementary question is, how are you making it more accessible to the R&D labs?
I think what we've currently seen is that, I'll just tie it in with the earlier question on COVID, right? So COVID, to what Dr. Kundu has mentioned, it's really made genomics more mainstream, right? Through the presence of genomic medicine, through vaccine development, through the accessibility of that knowledge to the common folk on the ground, it's really made it a lot more mainstream. And we see that mainstream actually translating not just here, in one field, but into multiple fields across the board, right? And which is something that's going to be the most important to drive for that change. We found that overall, for example, in terms of surveillance activities, in the past, surveillance activities was something that maybe would be done in the ambit of academia, right, for data collection work. But now surveillance is really helpful because it helped us detect the new variant that came out that caused a lot of concerns, right? It helps us to understand what to do to prepare for it. We've seen some work done in terms of wastewater surveillance as well, for example, to sort of prepare the healthcare system for increasing spikes just based on the data that they have found. So we found that technology in a lot of ways has actually impacted and made that change to that point. So I think it's just the very beginning, right? And I don't think that it's going to end. I think for us right now, what we are seeing is that we are working with many labs across the globe to think about, well, if we think that COVID is the first pandemic, it's not. If we think that COVID will be the last pandemic, it's probably not going to be there as well, right? We've reached this point where, similar to armed forces, right? You can't really recruit an army and train an army from scratch when the war is there. You really need to have preparation that's done. So I think it's important for a lot of the labs to think about the role that they can play, right, in addressing this, and that I think will be a really, really important one. Will it fizzle out right after everyone stopped talking about COVID and it's no longer the flavor of the week? Will it only recur again once there's a new respiratory pathogen that's out there that's causing a lot of concern? We feel that with the current onset of technology and the availability as well of data and how we manage data, I think the way the labs are able to respond in the future will be very, very different. I think it definitely served as a big wake-up call, right, in terms of how things are collaborated. And for me personally, I am actually really encouraged to see that focus go back into public health, right, which has long been always the responsibility of the government, to now even the private sector as well, taking that interest and that role in terms of trying to drive and accelerate it further. So that's how we're seeing it. We are also seeing labs get involved on their own, right? For example, in some countries that I've been in, I've seen where labs are formed not for profit because they want to improve the overall testing situation on the ground. Right, and then they're looking to procure and lead the technology change within that respective country. I think that's something that labs can play definitely a much bigger role, and we're definitely seeing that role transcend beyond the traditional aspects of what people expect a lab to play.
Sure. Thank you, Nicholas. And now this is the end of this particular session. And to sum it up, I would say, most of our speakers have talked about how important, adopting digital is, and particularly, shedding the inhibition towards the digital, adopting, going full scale, And also very important point is not to overuse it and keep a balance. Now moving to the third round, the question I have is, how has your organizations implemented digital initiatives? Any unique experiences at the industrial level as well as at your company level? That particular question first is to Dr. Anil Koul. Over to you, Dr. Koul.
Yeah, Rahul, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. It comes back to the same old discussion that how technology is changing the landscape of whatever we do in innovation. The key to building up the next level of innovation and innovative societies is, of course, digitalization. But beyond digitalization is this new element which we'll call data sciences. I think data science, if you look at it, it means several things. It means data analytics, it means data processing, it means data management. It means understanding or asking a question and using the data sets to prove your hypothesis or find answers. So how pharma is doing data sciences, it's through several things. If you go into the discovery, I said that in the discovery space, I think Anu already talked about it, the use of AI and ML, particularly in designing new molecules. In designing molecules which have right properties, which hit the right target, which have right selectivity, and which enable our medicinal chemists to take a leap forward in terms of those drug discovery approaches. So AI ML formats for drug discovery are very, very common these days. So a lot of people are trying to embed in their discovery programs as we speak. I think also what is interesting is the data science understanding of big data, the genomics data, which you guys already spoke about in terms of the genome analysis and the space with which we are getting the genomic data is really huge. And the same thing is about high content imaging. So people are using high content imaging right now, not as a screening tool. So you can imagine if you have to screen for SARS-CoV-2, you don't go through the conventional screens, you go through the high content imaging platforms. And these image analysis give you they give you 60 different variable parameters, which you can measure in a single well. And previously it was univariate. It was one single parameter, that was viral growth or viral kill. Now you can incorporate 60 different elements when you do a kind of a high content image analysis. So definitely a very powerful, once again, a powerful platform to screen, to test, to develop new drugs. I think beyond this, the same thing applies when we go into the preclinical models, as we go in the tox. Once again, understanding the tox from a big data perspective, the toxogenomics part of the whole thing is also completely embedded in the data science. So then if we go beyond this, if we go in the clinical sciences part of the whole thing, in the clinical sciences, I think what COVID has taught us how to recruit patients fast, how to build clinical trial capacities fast. And that only could be done once you look at the data in terms of the emerging infections in a particular city or particular zone. So that helps us to target, you do a targeted recruitment and globally. I think most of the companies are using it, what we call epidemiological surveillance in terms of emerging infections, in terms of the disease habits, in terms of the disease prevalences, in terms of in terms of building those mathematical models, how the disease progression will happen within months or within weeks. So it's all understanding from a data science perspective, how fast, how quick, how nimble, and how you can not only treat the present threat, but also the future pandemics or future threats, or any other disease where you have 100 different clinical sites which are enrolling patients, which can take this into account. So I think it's such a huge impact on whatever we do in the entire industry, as well as in the biological space. It's really amazing. I think in the next 5-10 years, we will see a huge progress based on the requirement of people who have the expertise in the data sciences. I will stop here, but there are several elements to it. I can go on speaking over and over, but I know that that the time is limited here.
Thank you, Dr. Koul. We'd love to see you speak. I mean, as long as you want. And now, my next question is to Dr. Anu Singh. And the question almost remains same, that your experiences at the organizational level, and what are the changes you have done, at your company in terms of digital adoption, and also, the implementation of the lessons from COVID-19, a bit from the, the question we had earlier asked. Over to you, Dr. Singh.
Yeah. Thanks, Rahul. I did speak about COVID, so maybe I'll share some other experiences beyond COVID, what we did. One of the things that we do a lot is target mapping through digital approaches for molecules, because that is something that requires a whole lot of data to be generated for regulatory submission. So when we have a candidate molecule and we want to know its targets, what are the molecular targets it's working on or not working on? So what Dr. Koul was saying here, rightly so. I mean, a couple of years back, if we just look back, sometimes we take technology for granted. But there was a time a few years back that for every marker that one had to look at, you use an ELISA for every marker. So now we are using multiplex technologies at our place where you can measure more than 80 different targets of a candidate lead in a single well. So that's the kind of multiplexing and high throughput of data. Now that data is then, because that's such a lot of data, not only do you require technology to generate that data, but you need the digital approaches to actually tabulate that data and analyze the data and create like heat maps in the data, which can be analyzed statistically, which can be analyzed by the scientists through a correlation. So I think we've done a lot of that work. The goal has been to expedite the research so that the scientists are free to do a whole lot of other things. This is not taxing for them. This is something that they use their intelligence to put the right inputs into the machine so that there is the meaningful data that's coming out in short time frames. That is one thing that we've done at the laboratory level in a very big way in our cell biology laboratories, and it has been very fruitful. The second thing which we have done, and I did talk about it earlier, I'll just mention it here again for sake of completion. It is repurposing of compounds. I spoke about it in context of COVID. Now, COVID, as we talked about, is perhaps gone or going, but as scientists, we are very well aware of the fact that it could come again, or things worse than COVID could also come. We have to be prepared and vigilant as scientists to keep our research work or to continue it in a manner where we actually should be able to bring about solutions rapidly if the need arises, right? So I think repurposing of compounds is another place where we put in a lot of technology that existing compounds to be evaluated for their different properties. For example, if there are Rahul, just to give you an example, for example, if there are 4 compounds or 10 compounds or hundreds which are known for hypertension, just for sake of discussion, I'm taking this example. And we want to know, do they have antiviral activities also, which are not reported so far? So that is repurposing, and that's the kind of thing where we are using a lot of digital technologies. There is a third place where we want to do it. We've started there, but it is work in progress. And I really want to digitalize this aspect very well in our laboratories. Dabur, as you know, we are the people who worked on plants for so many years now, more than 150 years. We have a legacy of plants. I really feel it is absolutely the time to put digital resources around natural products and make them accessible to the scientific community at large in a very good, usable form. People should be able to pick up that information in an easy to use interface and be able to use it for their programs, for their discovery programs, depending upon which therapeutic area they are working. This is a big job to do. I know people in India, across the world have done this, but I also want that in our organization, we take the lead in this and do. I would say we started about 2 years back. We are on there. And I hope that in the next 1 to 2 years, we should be able to completely digitize this resource as well. So just, I guess I'll stop here so that the others can also add.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. And the same question for Dr. Kundu again, that, what digital changes you have implemented at Premas Biotech?
No, thank you so much. I think Dr. Koul and Dr. Anu have said most of the things. So we haven't done anything. I would hesitate to say what we have done at COVID, because if you realize, Rahul, what I said, we had already implemented ELN about 14 years ago. So we continue to improve that. One of the things which, if I can talk about the lessons learned and why we should do it, is it really allows us to collaborate translationally across. Because when we start a project or we partner with someone, we harmonize. How would you like to see the report? At the end of the day, each lab has its own, or each company has its own way of representing perhaps a data. Like simple things like in a SDS gel, how would you show a loading pattern? What would be the things you would look for? How do you represent an immunoblot? How would you do that? Because there are multiple equipment, multiple formats, multiple things. So annotations become very important. So one of the things which we have realized, the way to accelerate transnational research is to have standardization of R&D processes. And that's where we brought in Lean for ourselves. Like, for example, we know cloning has 56 steps, and we know exactly how much time it takes. And why did we need to get down to drill down to this sort of understanding and data? Is so that when you tomorrow talk to a partner across, you are sort of, how do I say, organizing information in digestible boxes for it. So before we even start a partnership, we have a digital map of how the project workflow, reports, everything will look like. It's a lot of hard work that has gone on over the last decade, but it has made our life possibly simpler and captures somewhat of the historical perspective that I said, historical learning. Because a clinical program lasts for nearly 12 to 13, 15 years. Even if an employee leaves in 5 years and that position turns over every 5 years, that means across the spectrum of the clinical development, about 3 employees have at least touched that data at some point of time. And it's extremely important that we live through that, and they don't rediscover what is perhaps already solved, so that there is a new problem to solve, not perhaps an old problem that. And it comes especially, what Anu said was important, archival of reagents. 8 years after the clinical studies have begun, you may need that antibody, you may need that reagent all over again. Understanding the historical basis of that is perhaps where the easy steps of digitization has really happened. Archival of samples, archival of data, archival of easy accessibility, especially if you're running a cancer trial and things like that. So with that, I would like to really put that the lessons of COVID-19 are embedded post-COVID, which means what did we learn? How do we make sure we do make a better world out of it? I'll stop here.
Thank you, Dr. Kundu. My next question is for Dr. Taslim, and it is that, how would you imagine the futuristic smart labs and their impact on R&D? if we have to imagine?
Thank you. No, thank you so much, Mr. Rahul. Very interesting point, and something that one would like to draw on a canvas kind of question. So why not? But I would say that something that I kind of alluded to in my first point, that futuristically a lot of I would love to see possibilities of integration of digital or smart components into many aspects of the lab, including the many work which actually can be handled by machines. I think as many are being done, but at the same time, very importantly, I would say one component, if you were to ask me, is analytics. The current setup in the lab, while machines do a lot of work, the accuracy that we actually bring on the table has been from human assessment, and something that we would hugely benefit if we can build in capabilities at a bit higher level in terms of analysis of the data. Currently, many places, people say that many labs, many equipment which are being used, if you do not know how to analyze the data, it will be garbage in, garbage out. Right? And I think this is something that we need to kind of take care of, because this hugely limits the use of the high-end capabilities in the lab to a very few people who have gone through extensive training. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have had training, but I'm saying that this is the way the world is going to go. So one thing that we want is a analytics, inter lab equipment, intra-lab equipment, connectivity, data connectivity, and many things can be done. Somewhere you are doing an in vitro assay, somewhere you're doing a characterization. Is there a connect between the two? Somewhere doing the mass spec, at the same time, somewhere doing the metabolomics, or rather, metagenomics. Is there a connect between the two? Can that be done while there are software and pipeline you'll have to put together? Can that be done when we say that this is the same sample and something can be picked up from there? So there is a lot of excitement that could be built in, so that we can keep dreaming and keep trying many more things. Right now, human intervention is needed, which is perfectly fine. But once we teach what is being expected and what needs to be done, the flexibility that we would have to do many more things and many exciting things and many larger scale, turnaround time faster, and accuracy that would come in. Always second final decision could be ours, whether it makes sense or not. But we would love to have the one level of analytical recommendation, which we can build on and approve or disapprove of sorts. So something many of such things could be done, and I don't think it is far away. So I would say that this is coming our way very soon.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Taslim. And my next question is for Mr. Tan, and it is, how do you look at the digital labs as a catalyst for Make in India? And what are the chances that there'll be an announcement of a scheme for technology companies, to meet the potential demand? So is it possible?
I think that's a great question. And, I think that digital has actually created a new value, right? It's no longer just manufacturing in the same sense as we think about making in India, creating a factory and making an actual physical product, right? It's actually moved on towards creating products, software, interpretation tools, being able to harness, right, the capabilities of the lab, the learnings of the lab into a different environment. We also see that Make in India could be about creations of experiences and businesses, right? For example, what happens is usually after a single program is created, you realize that the lab actually runs on an ecosystem, right? It's not a standalone island. It definitely needs an ecosystem to work. And the tools, the learnings, also the capabilities around that, a lot of these things can actually be used and harnessed, right? For a Make in India experience. And I think that there's definitely room in India to see a lot of that. We see a lot of opportunities for software, especially, to showcase how do we best utilize data, right? I think that that's something that especially as data becoming more and more important, the software for interpretation data has definitely become important. The software that allows collaboration has definitely become important. So, Make in India, I think, can be harnessed in a different way. I think that India's got great amount of IT talent there that you can definitely look at, right? And that talent can also be looked into in a bioinformatics space. That's another area that we definitely see a lot of demand in, right? Where many labs I know are struggling to hire and fill the headcounts of bioinformaticians everywhere. I've not heard of a single lab that's ever said that we've got more than enough bioinformaticians around. Everybody seems to be running short of this, right? And they are actually competing with the other big tech companies as well, right? Trying to secure that limited pool of talent. So the development of any tools, software, or products that you're able to automate some of these, I think that's definitely going to be an area of importance. And at the moment, I do see that it's at its infancy. So we literally finding out new information, asking new questions every single day, and that's always exciting. The question is, how do you harness a lot of these into actual development and actual work? In Illumina, we've partnered with, we have an accelerator program for startups. We've seen a lot of interest in terms of, genomic startups to look and dice data and analyzing all the different sort of ways. We've had certain members of the accelerator alumni as well from India, right? So I think there's definitely room there to be able to tap this.
Thank you, Mr. Tan. And I'd like to ask a question to Dr. Koul. It is again the same question I asked to Dr. Taslim, that how do you imagine the futuristic smart labs and their impact on R&D? Dr. Koul.
Yeah, Rahul, I think as a lot has been said about it right now, in terms of which we have to go it step by step. I think what we, as I said, from an Indian context, right now we everything what we do is digital here. But as I was in India, we really need to see how do we implement the ELN framework in the first go, because it's all about not only about the ease and the compliance, it's all about archiving the data, creating that IP framework when the experiment was done, when the compounds were synthesized, so that we can claim the rightful ownership of the idea as well as the technology. So the challenge is basically sometimes the cost of ELN implementation in certain organizations. So the question is always, how can we indigenize some of these frameworks and build newer versions of ELN which can be implemented nationally across all the major institutions? So can we have a common framework of ELNs which can go across all the universities, labs, all the government-funded projects should use that kind of an program or an infrastructure where everything can be connected and can be easily retrieved, can be easily archived. So this is the very simple thing, and this is the basic step which we should at a national level think about getting into the framework, at least within certain organizations like CSI, DBT, or ICMR and things like that, or even at the university level. So of course, as I said that, can we develop our own indigenous ELN platforms? So this is one aspect of going ahead. Of course, then investment in the technologies, futuristic technologies, and not only the platform, but the know-how. How do we train people who are more analyzing the data science problems rather than being data miners. We don't need data miners. We need people who understand the data, who can question the data, who can build the hypothesis out of the data, because otherwise just building those data sheets may not be very helpful for the future generation. We need to ask the right questions from the Indian context into that. And from that perspective, I think, as we discussed in terms of mathematical modelings, in terms of high content imaging, in terms of all the omic platform, which are heavily data dependent, we definitely need to train the next generation of our scientists to look at the data and to be analytical about the data, to look at the problems within the data and the solutions within the data, rather than just mining the data. I think that's something which I would personally love to see.
Thank you, Dr. Koul, for such interesting insight. And I'd like to ask Dr. Anu Singh, are there any risks, and is risk aversion, impacting digitalization by R&D based companies?
Rahul, there is, I won't call it risk aversion. Maybe still, that's still the right term. It is, like I said somewhere at the start, that I think it's that shifting to the change, and also, of course, finance. Of course, it takes money, a significant amount of money to shift to these technologies. That's an investment that one has to make. That one simple fact that I use to advocate the change and risk aversion behavior when it comes up is, there is so much statistics that has been done by large consulting companies which have actually looked at data across the world in laboratories, in universities, in corporate setups, where they have said that as much as 70% of data that is generated in the laboratories can be irreproducible, because the process of documentation of data, this whole thing about maintaining data properly, maintaining it confidentiality, with confidentiality, making it independent of the person who actually worked on it. By that, I mean that if a person leaves the organization, the data is still intact and archived. So when they talk about 70% irreproducibility of the data, that's a very bothersome fact. Now that's a thought process that I build into my organization when we take steps towards digitalizing it. That we are doing so much work, we are taking years to do that work, and that work is either we won't be able to patent it, or we would lose that data, or somebody will start again from point zero. So yes, to some extent there is some sort of a risk aversion, but I don't think it is difficult to solve this problem if we keep making people see the good in it. There is good in it. There is benefit for everybody who's involved in it. And we have to actually use it more like a training. And I want to give you one example that I recently followed, and it worked very well. In our organization, we have two types of scientists and groups. They are divided into two. One is what we call the discovery group, and other is who does studies for regulatory submissions. Now, the ones who do for regulatory submissions are very, very particular that they have to follow all the right practices, digital recording, compliances, audits, archive, everything. It is ingrained in those scientists. Of course, not to say they don't make mistakes, but it is basically ingrained. The discovery scientists are the ones that I have had to train to think that your data is as precious as these other guys are generating. You also need to follow a process. So I have arrived at a working model where we are using the regulatory teams to teach the discovery teams that this is the way we use the digital to save our own time. This is the way we use a machine to actually generate a lot of data where we can do something else. This is the benefit in doing it. So in a way, we've used the ones who are the converts to help the ones that who are not converting easily. So I mean, I just felt, so we have to use multiple approaches to bring about these practices in an organization.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Singh. And I'll ask a quick question to Dr. Kundu, and that is, the same question I asked Dr. Taslim, that how do you look at the digital labs as a catalyst for Make in India? And would there be a PLI scheme for technology companies to manufacture in India? Is that possible?
Thank you. I think, as I said, digitalization of instrumentation data is already full steam ahead. There is no looking back. The question for us is, can we now, from lab, go to an organizational level of digitalization? It's just not the QC lab or the analytical lab that is now on, fully 21 CFR, but understanding what that does regulation mean. What's in it for us? Why should we invest so much money and effort to do it as an organizational level? And then from an organization to a collective level, to a country level, and etc., etc. So my 2 cents on this are very simple. This is the future. Collaboration and translation will be there. As much as people think that each country will now need to protect itself for manufacturing, so that if tomorrow again borders are closed, we should be able to produce our own drugs and etc., etc. We need to overcome that fear by allowing free transformation to happen. And I think it makes a lot of sense for sometimes developed economies to help rising economies like India digitize faster, because what digitization does is actually take the inertia out of the system. If you look at the top 10 today, unicorns of India, they are less on innovation and more on taking the ineffectiveness out of the system.
Absolutely.
Food coming to you within 10 minutes, medicines coming to you within 15 minutes, ambulance coming. So anything that had, or a digital payment portal, they are taking the inefficiencies out of the system, and we have readily adopted to it because it's helping us. Now the question is, we will adopt to a digitization of laboratory spaces if we see an immediate impact and a need to do so. Just because somebody tells us to do so, as you said, it can have a financial implication on an inertia itself. We have taken up digitization, or even the cellular phone. We had no telephone to cellular phone. We didn't go through a wired telephony.
Yes.
Any country in the world that went through a wired telephony actually adopted cellular technology late.
Yeah.
India went from no telephony to cellular telephony. So again, this is the impact that it had on the economy, because people felt it made sense. You could communicate, do whatever X, Y, Z. So the same thing is going to happen with digitization. Of course, we need to popularize it, work towards it, but once people realize the impact of it and the benefit, they will adopt it. That's my view on this. No, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kundu. And now we are at the fag end of the discussion. I'll sum it up. It would mean that it is as true for most industries, as in the life sciences sector. Digital transformation is no longer a buzzword, but a strategic imperative for life sciences companies. So while first movers would likely gain a competitive advantage, all of today's companies risk falling behind their competitors in delivering, across all elements of value chain, if their strategies are limited to few pilots or experiments. So opportunities for digital transformation, I would say, are available throughout their life sciences organizations, from business operations such as production and enabling functions to engagement with patients, physicians, health systems, and payers also, to develop new products and services. So in this discussion, we explored various digital transformation to enhance life sciences organizations, such as efficient execution. Digital can help companies execute better by improving performance and reducing costs through collaboration, centralization of digital technologies to streamline delivery and enhance capabilities across organization or divisions. So I would say, it was a very great, engaging discussion for all of us here, and I would like to thank, my panelists who have taken, great pain in, putting together a lot of effort in, preparing for this particular discussion. And I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of delegates who were with us during this discussion, and I would like to thank the team at BioVoice News for working tirelessly to help this happen, make this happen today. This video will be available on the website www.biovoicenews.com, and based on the deliberations we had today, a report shall also be published and made accessible on our news site. Your suggestions and feedback is welcome at rk@biovoicenews.com and connect@biovoicenews.com. I once again thank all our esteemed panelists and look forward to connect with them very soon. Thank you, Dr. Anil Koul, Dr. Anu Singh, Dr. Prabhuda Kundu, Dr. Taslimarif Sayied, and Mr. Nicholas Tan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul.
Rahul, thank you very much.
Panelists, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr.
Bye-bye.
Rahul. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. This is Rahul Koul signing off. Thank you and goodbye.